Welcome back to WaterparkRangers, the Let's Play Pikmin 2. Last episode, we returned to the perplexing pool and went after the last two of the above-ground treasures here. We're currently carrying back the last one that we had to get out of that puzzle. And afterwards, we're going to be heading off to the last dungeon before we clear the debt. So in some sense, I guess that could be a sort of final dungeon. There's a reason I picked it for last. It's because it's rather infamous. Arguably, it's probably one of the most difficult in the game. However, it's not always so bad. The first time you do it on your first file without knowing what's inside, it might be your worst dungeon experience. Possibly worse than the real final dungeon of the game, you know? Even though it's kind of ambiguous as to what really counts for final, because you have so much, freedom in this game as to what you're supposed to do first. I just have an order that I like, and I've mentioned this before. But this dungeon has given people a lot of trouble, and it gave me a lot of trouble in the past, too. Now that I know what to expect, I don't think it's as bad, and so, honestly, I think that the other dungeons in the Valley of Repose are more dangerous than it, once you know what to expect. But if you don't know what to expect, it will probably be the toughest one, so that's basically the lowdown on it. And with that being said, we're going to head off to it right now. Now, you want a very unusual party for it. That party is precisely 60 blue Pikmin. That's my recommendation. No more, no less. The reason for that will be explained inside the dungeon. This dungeon does work differently from every other in the game. First off, the entry is located entirely in water, so you cannot bring any Pikmin to the dungeon, no matter how hard you try. Even if you do somehow manage to get them there, and I know there are YouTube videos that prove this, the dungeon is programmed to only allow in blue Pikmin. So somehow they got that to work. Ignore the skitteries there. And it is located in the furthest regions of the perplexing pool. Some people say the shower room is harder to get to because of the electric fence, but I think this one is just more out of the way. And for good reason. I believe it's definitely tougher than the shower room, in my opinion. Oh boy, here we go. Interesting. Deeper sections of this hole seem to be submerged in liquid. Sadly, I'm a delicate piece of machinery that is sensitive to water. You two must go alone. Why do you look at me with such scornful expressions? I'm an expensive machine! You can't go alone, and we wouldn't be able to take the treasure. Fine, I'll go, but this wantonly reckless treatment of company property will be reported. So, the pod doesn't want to go in here at all, and I kind of don't either, because I really don't like this dungeon. You can see it has all elements. I recommend having a fully flowered party before you go in, just because speed is of the essence. In fact, I believe that Ultra Spicy Spray is a great asset to you because of how quickly it will allow your Pikmin to move, thus allowing them to bring back the treasures more quickly. So you can only bring blue Pikmin in here despite the fact that every elemental hazard is present in this dungeon. Including bomb rocks. They're not really an element. And there aren't any falling rocks, so I guess those aren't there. However, basically, that involves, because you only bring in blues, you have to use creative strategies to work around each problem. And by creative, I basically mean, for traps like fire, you need to just wait till the fire goes out and then attack them, so you really don't have to. You just need to be slightly smart, that's it. Just the ability to adapt. Adapt or die. And here, dying happens quite often. Already, that was a little bit annoying. Of course, we also have a fiery blowhog to deal with. This first level is really barren, although I know there is another fiery blowhog that can drop from above, usually in a corner, so be on the lookout for that. That being said, fiery blowhogs are much easier than they were in the first, so fighting them with Pikmin other than reds is really not a problem at all. Oh, jeez. And because this dungeon is also a bit more dangerous, they actually have a geyser on the very first floor. So if that isn't a sign that this place is more than it seems, then that should tip you off. The music here is very dreary. It actually is the only only background track in the game that isn't a boss track that does not change depending on what pilot is currently in control. You've seen that the other music for the background of levels does change, like the pace changes depending on whether or not you're the first captain or the second, Louis or Olimar. So that is different here. Lots of differences here. And finally, the most notable horrible thing about this dungeon is that you are timed. That's why the Ultra Spicy Spray is good for bringing everything back to your ship. That's because I believe each sublevel has a 5-minute timer. When that 5-minute timer runs out, something very bad happens. And yes, the last treasure in this level is being held by Fiery Bullblacks. It's in the water, so fortunately, its flames are extinguished, meaning we can probably defeat it without too much trouble. And maybe without losing a Pikmin? Oh, wow, I got too hopeful there. We lost 2. That was great, though, because the problem about the fiery bullblacks is usually it's going to spawn not in the water, and what you're going to have to do is lure it into the water, and when it's in the water is the only time you can fight it. Whoa! I told you about the fiery bullhog that dropped from the ceiling, man! Yeah, I told you about fiery bullhogs, man! They keep happening! Right. About the fiery bullblacks, you need to lure it in the water to fight it, otherwise, as you've seen with it before, the fire is just going to repel all attacks. Also, I don't think there's any reason for us to be fighting this guy. In fact, it's wasting our time, but I thought I'd defeat him. And yes, that fire bullblacks did hold a treasure. Oh right, I would recommend using a bitter spray against him, as for all fiery bullblacks is, but particularly for this one, because of how you have to fight it in the water, what you want to do is lure it into the water, make sure it's fully submerged, because the second it steps out, it's going to light on fire again, so make sure it's in the water, then hit it with an ultra bitter spray, and then defeat it while it's petrified and in the water. That's my recommendation for it. And, I don't really think that the timer's going to give us trouble. See, that's the thing about this dungeon. All the trouble comes from the thing that happens 5 minutes into each sub-level, but once you get good at this game, 5 minutes is a lot for any sub-level, so it really shouldn't take you that long for any of the sub-levels, once you know what you're doing and what to expect on each floor, to just quickly get to the treasure without actually encountering that 5-minute obstacle. I guess that brings us to the last really unique thing about this dungeon, which is why you wanted 60 blues and not 100. That's because you're actually going to find a way to get 40 more Pikmin down here. And I think you're actually going to find out this very episode, because otherwise this would be too short an episode, and I want to show a little bit of the next sub-level 2. Now, usually sub-level 2 is the one that'll take a little bit longer if it's your first time. But if it's not your first time, sub-level 2 shouldn't pose too much of a problem, because you'll already know what to expect, because the layout here doesn't change. The layout for sub-level 2 is always the same. There's always going to be the room you start out in, a very big room, which has like a pipe, and another room which is small and you need to throw Pikmin up to get their stuff. Okay, now here it is. You see that? That there is a Bulborb with a Pikmin leaf growing out of its head with 10 small versions of itself trailing behind. Also a new enemy nearby, creating Dirigibug. This enemy throws bomb rocks. Now we can make this work to our advantage by bringing the bomb rock over to this creature called the Bullman, killing it in one hit, and now calling the little Bullman to our side. That's right, the Bullman join your party, the half Bulborb, half Pikmin. The confused Bulborb has fallen in with the Pikmin. They appear to coexist peacefully. Strange, this Bulborb has a leaf spreading from its spine, much like the leaf on a Pikmin's head. Now, the reason that the bomb didn't kill the Bullman there is not because they're immune to explosions. It's because they're programmed differently when they're not currently in your party. Explosions seem to not affect them. But after they join your party, they start getting hurt by explosions. Anyway, creating Dirigibugs are a new enemy as well, in addition to Bullman. They're really bad news, because they immediately spawn bomb rocks and try and throw them at you. They also have a lot of HP, so that's annoying. Now, my recommendation for them, purples all the way. If you toss a single purple on a creating Dirigibug, they immediately fall to the ground. Obviously you can't do that in here, but for the later parts where you're going to encounter them, and believe me, we'll fight a lot of them, purples come highly recommended. They come recommended highly if you're going to squash those lime-colored creating Dirigibugs. Anyway, now that the Bullmen have joined our party, we have 8 more, because we lost 2 blue Pikmin earlier. And the whole reason that you needed to bring in 60 is because we're going to find 30 more Bullmen. If you bring in 100 blue Pikmin, and you have like 100 whenever you appear on a sub-level that has a Bullman spawning, that Bullman is not going to give you as many Bullmen as it could. In fact, if you have 100, it won't be able to give you any. For instance, if you have 99, it will be able to give you 1 Bullman. And if you have 89, it'll still give you 10. 10 is the max amount for each Bullman. So that's basically how Bullman programming works. And oh no, that was the evil place to put a Dwarf Orange Bulborb! Yeah, what are they even doing in here? Honestly, a lot of these enemies are in danger due to the thing that's going to appear in 5 minutes. That's right, it's bad enough that it goes after even the fearsome Dwarf Orange Bulborbs. What could it be? You might find out next episode as we continue the Submerged Castle.